Welcome to the Women's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Women's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
Welcome. We've all wanted to do something exciting in our lives to change it. Well, our guest has done it, and she has started a mammoth project that we're going to hear about. And I would like to welcome Sarah Beatty. Sarah, so glad to meet you and have you join me today.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here.
You started an incredible green project, the hot buzzword of the day. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, in 2005, I founded a company. The company's name is Green Depot. And the mission of Green Depot is to make green building materials and supplies readily available so that green building can be easy, affordable, and gratifying for everyone.
You're located mainly in Brooklyn, but you said that you're going to be expanding around the country, Manhattan.
We'll be doing, we founded the company with our flagship store in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. It's East Williamsburg or Greenpoint, depending on who you ask. And we love that because we love being in the heart of Brooklyn and in New York. Serving that constituency. We recently opened locations in Stoneham, Massachusetts. We have locations in Philadelphia as well as Newark, New Jersey that just opened. Oh. We have a place in the North Fork that's going to be opening soon, and Manhattan. We have an opportunity with 15 locations from Maine to Virginia. So our first goal will be to really help open up the possibilities for green building in the Northeast.
What does green really mean?
That's such a good question. I'm asked so often. The interesting thing, there's so many people out there that are saying green, green, green. It really means different things to different people. I kind of say to some folks, you can kind of consider green as kind of like religion in that people take different meanings from it. But for many people, some of the things you may hear is the idea of being kind to the earth, having a sense of having an environment that's non-toxic so that you can live in a healthy way inside your home. Recycling is something people consider is a green thing, something that doesn't deplete the resources of the earth. So really using things that are rapidly renewable so that we can keep sort of the wonderful, bountiful sort of elements that we have here on the earth in play so that, you know, not only our generation but future generations can enjoy them. So green really does mean different things to different people, but those are some of the things that when, you know, one of the first things we ask at Green Depot is when they say we want to build green or I want to do something green, we always say, well, what do you mean by that? What's important to you?
It's the buzzword. It's hot these days. What can we do to make our life more environmentally sound, because we are bombarded with so much plastics and chemicals and everything else? I
think the bottom line is we have to be a bit more thoughtful about the choices that we're making and how we consume in general. Okay. In a host of ways. Just think of how, you know, we kind of oftentimes don't think about, we'll go and we'll buy a soda and, you know, we'll pick up a plastic bottle and the next thing you know it's in a garbage and we don't really think after that where it goes. So I think, you know, as a first step, what I often say to friends and what we really are adopting in our own house is let's be more thoughtful for how we're going to live on a day-to-day basis, and instead of maybe buying whatever we're drinking in, you know, cans that have to go to landfill, maybe there's a creative way that we can look at the water supply and having a water filter on our tap. You know, that's one simple example. I think in general, it's kind of an interesting time, not only with green building, but also with our communities in general, in that I think that I've certainly benefited from thinking more about how the products that I buy, how they're made, where they're made, how it affects the earth, you know, in the process, how far they have to travel. It's kind of interesting that there's this true interest now in green building because people want to reduce their carbon footprint. They want to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. One of the easy ways to do that is to buy locally. So in that way, buying things that are manufactured locally in the local neighborhood within a 500-mile radius reduces the amount of energy that's expended actually shipping something from point A to point B. So one other thing that folks will do is they'll think about, can you find something in the local environment? Could I get this? What's happening with green right now is that there's an interest in green, and also there's a number of manufacturers now that are saying, wow, we could actually transform some of our plants right here around New York and start producing some of these materials, and it's a win-win because it helps reignite the economy around us. It supports sort of manufacturing and a new idea of manufacturing in the New York sector. And it's also investing in products that will be healthier, not only for the earth and hopefully, for the environment, but really importantly for us as humans, for how we're existing in this space.
From what I understand, going green, if I went into your store and wanted to change certain things like the paints and everything else, it's like 6% more expensive.
Sure.
What makes it 6%?
Green building supplies, they're coming down in price. The reason why they're still a bit more expensive is oftentimes they have to replace a chemical that is there previously with something that isn't as cheap.
Okay.
And that chemical that they're replacing has volatile organic compounds that can release into the air that potentially can make people sick. So it's a good thing to replace it, but when you replace it, oftentimes the ingredients aren't as cheap as the chemical alternative. That's one thing. Another big aspect with green building materials is if you're producing less, oftentimes your unit price is more. So, this sort of movement is getting started. I really hope that now that Green Depot is in this space and more will be joining us and there'll be more, sort of production occurring, hopefully prices will be able to come down even more. Green building, 10, 15 years ago was 20% more than, on average, than not building your building green. And now we've seen it go down, year to year. Now it's closer to about 6%. And obviously you can make choices that are more expensive or less expensive. But I think what people really have to think about is for themselves, what's important to them and what kind of environment they want to create. In your house, indoor environments can be up to 10 times more toxic than outside. And the reason is because we're building these buildings that are so air sealed tight that everything that you bring in or in that environment kind of can stay there. So if you are painting with paints that off-gas into the space, that paint smell is really volatile organic compounds that we're breathing in with our skin, et cetera. If you put a carpet down and you adhere, and it's synthetic fibers, and there's adhesive that you attach to it that is going to off-gas into the space. With these tight air-sealed buildings, there's nowhere for all that gas to go. And so we're breathing it and we're living with it. Our skin is taking it in every single day.
So keep the window open.
Or think about how, how there is a way for air filtration to occur in the house, and also invest in products that, can reduce the amount of volatile bad stuff that you'd be putting into the air.
For example, how can somebody just start slowly and methodically to convert their home from what it is into something green?
I'm a perfect example because I never would have imagined I would have started a green building supply company. This is not my background, but I was pregnant with my first child. I had just finished a full apartment renovation in New York City. Everything not green. It was about 8 months later, and typically after you build a house, you have to, you go through some pains along the way. And it was a week before I was delivering my first child, and my floors were popping up, my wood floors. And so I had a wood floor specialist come in, and he said, I want you to sit down. He said, I have to tell you that I think that all of your wood floors are infested with mold, and if that's the case, you and your unborn child, a week to be born, really have to leave immediately. You may have to check into a hotel, and we should get a specialist in to evaluate it. That moment for me, being kind of a non-green person before, was really that seminal moment of realization that I thought I had built this apartment that was the safest haven for my family and for my growing family, and unbeknownst to me, no smell or anything, I could have been in a toxic situation. So that really was the time when that really woke me up to the notion of, well, I think about what I eat. I think about, how I can live a more healthful life and a responsible life, but do I really know for all of those things that I consume every day, how they could affect me in my indoor environment? So some of the simple things, the first things we did is, instead of ripping everything out that wouldn't be very green, because it's not, the idea is actually the best way to be green is to not do a lot of changes in building. But we all kind of have to grow along the way. So what we did is we actually had a specialist come in, evaluate our whole home, and we actually pulled up one rug, which we felt was going to be off-gassing, and we repainted our children's rooms using no VOC paints, non-toxic paints. So we started with finishes, and then we decided beyond that we would invest in non-toxic cleaners for our house. So in that way, to begin, we said, well, we're not going to throw everything else we did, but we're going to ensure that on the inside of our house, we're going to maintain it in such a way that it's healthy, and we know, because we had this toxic specialist come in, that our house is safe.
Well, what about the wood?
We took our shoes off too. When we came in the house, take your shoes off, because all of the particles that you have on your shoes, if you have carpets in your house, you drain them right into your house. There's a chemical called 2D that was in Agent Orange that they found in homes and in carpets in studies, because it's in pesticides. So if you can walk outside, you get pesticides, whatever else on your shoe, you bring those right in and they go into your carpet, along with dander and allergens, et cetera. So take your shoes off at the door and enjoy some indoor slippers. Yeah.
So what did you wind up doing with the potential moldy floor that you had?
Well, the good news was that we discovered that the mold contamination really was limited to one area. So we were able to go through remediation and take care of that, and I did not have to rip up my hardwood floors.
Oh,
so that was a huge relief. But I got to say that being in that state with my hormones racing, I was 50 pounds heavier, to think that I would have to leave my home. It was a pretty frightening moment. There are kits that we have at our store, and any person could get, that if you're suspicious, if there's mold in your home or radon or lead, there are simple testing kits that people can get that will give them at least a first indication as to whether there's a presence of those kinds of toxins in your house.
So from this experience, you decided to start a store?
Yeah, from that experience, and also, I just really believed there wasn't much of, there was no place I could get the answers or get the information or access to the products. People would say, oh, well, yes, there is a product, but that company, you'll have to get it from them directly, and how do we get it here? So I thought about it more, and I was able to convince a major investor who actually runs a leading building supply firm that services New York. I said, you really, really should you should invest with me, and we should build basically the first full-service green building supply firm that can service not only homeowners but also commercial builders. In New York City, greenhouse gases from building represents about 70% of the greenhouse gases in carbon emissions in the city. Living in a city is actually very green in that, we're all huddled together. So the heat in the city and the way we use the infrastructure of public transport, et cetera, in some ways it's a very green way of living, to live in an infrastructure of a city. When it comes to building, though, we really have to think about sort of how we're building in a way that is practical and that is thoughtful as far as what we're putting up into the air, because we breathe that air. And as you know, there's concerns about air quality. Recently, there were reports about concerns with air quality in the Bronx, also concerns about air quality in downtown Manhattan. So we really want to ensure that long-term, the vibrancy of our cities is maintained. I was able to convince this investor. I said, people really, if there was a way for people, commercial builders and homeowners, to easily get the materials that they need to build a LEED building, leadership in energy and environmental design, which is an actual standard that the U.S. Green Building Council has created. If there was an easy way to access this materials, more people would do it.
Can't you get rebates from the government if
you
you
absolutely
go
can.
LEED?
Yes, you can. There are tax incentives, there are rebates. One of the first things we did at our first flagship store was we converted our energy. We have solar panels on our roof, so now we basically have a hybrid system, and we're one of the first companies in Brooklyn to do that, which is really exciting. And the great thing for us is in the summertime we can go off the grid for Con Ed when there's a real demand, peak energy demand. That kind of thinking, that kind of practical thinking about how we can diversify our pulls on the city so that, you know, our infrastructure can remain strong. Now there are materials in the green building world that didn't exist 10 years ago that now do exist that actually perform many times a lot better than the standard materials do, and they're healthier for you.
Let me ask you about bamboo.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that that's such an environmentally friendly product.
Yeah, bamboo is a rapidly renewable material, which means that when it's harvested and it's cut down, it will grow back. So you're not going to be sort of hurting the environment of the earth in the long run. It will grow back, which is fantastic, and it's a really wonderful material for cabinetry, for flooring, you know, etc.
What would you say is the #1 detriment to our environment, and what can we do about it?
It's a two-part answer. I think that we all need to be more thoughtful about how we consume. I say it again, but I really do believe, you know, there have been so many different shows, et cetera. One, you know, screw in one light bulb that's a complex black fluorescent bulb, a CFL, or use one less napkin, but it really is, I think in many ways, that simple. If we were more thoughtful as a whole group for how we consumed, and we did it in a more sort of earth-friendly manner, we'd be able to vastly improve sort of what's occurring.
So in other words, go back to the glass bottles for soda versus the plastic bottles we have now?
Or, you know, with plastic, which oftentimes is a better material for, you know, holding certain, you know, products, let's hope that there's more manufacturers that actually use recycled plastic. There's certain things that are now on this earth, you know, we're going to have vinyl flooring in landfills for a long time. You know, we're going to have, you know, plastic to deal with. It's there. There's something really innovative about, and this is something exciting that's happening in the green building space, is, well, how can we take something that's old and make it new again? A great example is a local company here called Ice Stone. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I've never heard of it.
Ice Stone is a company that's in Brooklyn, right here in the Navy Yard in Brooklyn, and they produce beautiful kitchen countertops that are made out of recycled glass bottles.
Oh,
so
wow.
Old, you know, beer bottles, old recycled glass mirrors, and all of that is built into used in a spectacular, non-toxic, you know, cradle to cradle, you know, beautiful countertop. There's an innovation there that I think is so important, and it's exciting because it's really what our country was built on. Certainly, what New York thrives on is innovation, and I think that, you know, the exciting thing to me is that we seem to be in a time when there's all of these forces are beginning to come together. We have consumers that say, I want to make sure I can live in a healthy way, and I want to make sure my investments are smart, and then you have business coming at this sort of space as well.
Okay, what kind of toxins are we exposed to here living in the city versus somebody who's living in the suburbs or even in the country?
Well, I would say a big issue in the city is our air quality and the amount of smog from cars and from buildings and production of buildings. So air quality is definitely something in cities that you have to be aware of. Other than that, with other VOCs, I call them VOCs, they're volatile organic compounds. That can be, you know, they have long names like polyglycol, et cetera, but really if you think of like new car smell or paint smell, et cetera, if you're in an enclosed environment and you can't get away from, you know, from a new paint or an adhesive on the floor, if you're in a smaller area, they tend to be more dangerous for you. For example, another big thing is formaldehyde. There's a lot of materials that are produced with formaldehyde that you may, you know, in our everyday life.
For example?
Formaldehyde, kitchen cabinets historically are made with a plywood box that has that is made with pressed wood or wood particle board that is glued together with formaldehyde-based glue. Well, formaldehyde obviously can off-gas and create significant issues and be a carcinogen if it's in an enclosed area. One big example of that is recently the FEMA trailers that people had used who had to leave Katrina, and they were in these FEMA trailers. There was a family of 5, who had major issues with nosebleeds, and actually one got an actual mouth cancer, and they tracked it back to the fact that that FEMA trailer had been built out of basically plywoods that were used formaldehyde-like glues, and because they were in a smaller space. Whenever you're in a smaller space, the impact of those kinds of VOCs become more intense. So I would say in cities where we live in smaller areas, really thinking about your indoor environment. If you're going to have a renovation, do a renovation. Definitely make sure you open a window, but more importantly, if you're going to think about using a paint, think of using a no VOC paint with no volatile organic compounds, or a low VOC paint. Ask where your woods came from. You don't want to have formaldehyde in your cabinets. It's one less thing that will sort of expel an off gas into your space. Someone from the Hollis Institute told me a week or 2 ago, he said, we always think about what we eat and we put in our mouth, but we breathe things through our skin all the time so if you have a new baby in the house and you've just redone their room and you've put down a new carpet, but it's with this very toxic glue, and the walls are newly painted, and you just got to be aware that you're moving them into a space that that possibly could affect them. And I never would have known that. And I was pregnant. I had everything redone, right before my daughter, came home. And now I certainly know, and I'm glad that I discovered it. It's not about changing everything, but for us, in my family, we said, all right, we're going to try to make practical, smart decisions for how we'll move forward from here, and really ask the questions about what's in that, what's inside that. What do we know about it? Another example is, there's a natural linoleum as a flooring. You could get that in the United States before the 50s. In the 50s, all the plants were shut down. Now you can only get natural linoleum made out of resin and linseed oil, etc., from Europe. It's a beautiful product, lasts longer than traditional vinyl linoleum kitchen floors, which most of us have in the United States. And vinyl as a product is incredibly toxic. The creation of it through development of PVC and plasticizers in plants, it's a known danger to people that actually produce in those environments. And once it's produced, it's there. It's going to be in a landfill. And now there's some studies that show that once it's in the landfill with the plasticizer and the PVC, some of that could seep out of the product and into our water supply and into the earth. So, once again, if we have a natural alternative that will perform 2 to 3 times better than a standard produced material that is going to cause some problems with our sort of ecosystem, which one would you choose?
What specifically does your company, Green Depot, make or manufacture that we could get?
Sure. Green Depot is a distributor of green building materials, everything from the siding for your house and the roofing and those type of items down to the final finishes in your home. So for example, if you were building a home and you wanted to build it in a way that you could ensure that the framing of your house was sound and it was going to be resistant to mold or insects, etc., we have a product called Ivy Wood that is treated with a natural biocide that ensures you'll never have to call a termite man, for the framing of your house. Roofing, sidewalks that are rubber sidewalks for playgrounds. We offer cleaning supplies, carpets, the natural linoleum flooring I mentioned from Forbo, ice stone countertops. It really is a real broad array of items that we offer and distribute to our clients.
Any way to get rid of the critters that live in Manhattan without doing harm to ourselves?
Yeah.
Okay.
There actually is. We have, it's so funny, it came up this past weekend as well with a group that was in. We have natural alternatives for termites. We have natural alternatives for bed bugs. We have a product that actually looks at rodent and rat control and can attack that problem in a way that's not going to compromise the health and the well-being of your house. Some services that we're going to be offering in the New York marketplace, we are in the same way as you would call someone and say, I want to child-proof my home, we're going to have something called Green Depot's Healthy House Call. And we can actually send someone out if there was a concern about mold, et cetera, and not only do a review of someone's home and say, we're going to do an environmental assessment of your home, but also provide people some tips and some suggestions for how they can maintain the integrity of the inside of their home. For builders, we have a program called Flip It Green. So if a client has gone to a contractor and said, I want my home to be green, but these builders don't know what to do, they can come into Green Depot with their spec and plans, and we will literally flip their spec green. And we will do so while at the same time respecting the price they have to go within. You know, green building is affordable, but just like when you build a regular house, you have a budget and you have to make decisions as you go. But Flip It Green is a way that we can show people right there how you can really look at healthier, safer alternatives, practical alternatives for building with Flip It Green. Also, what we have right now we've developed in the market is there's a lot of really talented folks that are in the green world, whether they be architects or trades, contractors, subcontractors, specialists, and it's been so hard not only for them to connect with one another, the U.S. Green Building Council certainly has helped, but also for customers to find them. So many customers have come to us in the last 2 years and said, I'm so happy now that I know I can get the products from you, but do you know a good solar person? Or can you help me out? I really would like to find a great green interior designer. So we've actually created something called the Green Depot 360 Network, which is an idea is to create local clusters of folks that we know at Green Depot are reputable, knowledgeable folks in green, and really allow them, provide referrals to our clients. So we're really trying to sort of make it possible to live green and build green in New York and beyond.
What would you like to leave the audience with?
Like to let them know that it really is possible to build in a healthy green way, and we're going to try to make it easy for people now. And so give us a call, go online. There are so many services, and certainly I think in doing so, it's an investment in our own healthy today and a better future for the city.
Sarah, thank you so much.
I've
learned so much. It's been phenomenal, and I thank you very much. And I hope you've learned something about going green. Love to hear from you. Please write us. Sarah would be delighted to answer any of your questions. Look forward to hearing from you. Bye now.